everyone can hear me okay. My name is Gabor, and I am the Managing Director of Online EU Training. Those of you who are completely new to the whole process of getting an EU job, Online EU Training is a website dedicated to helping people prepare and practice for the EU competitions, which, as we've heard from all the presentations today, is something of a challenge. And I think I think it was just announced that in cooperation with La Comunidad de Madrid, Online EU Training is offering, well, actually La Comunidad de Madrid is offering 200 places in a online training, basically, for people interested in getting an EU job and becoming a candidate. And the training basically consists of a package of practice tests which you can use to prepare yourself for the pre-selection phase of the exam. Hopefully by now it's clear to everyone what the pre-selection phase consists of, but we're going to go through that very quickly. Okay, next slide please. Just a couple of words about Online EU Training. Over the years, we have had over 60,000 registered users, and I'm just mentioning this to indicate that there's huge interest in EU jobs. And if somebody is interested in EU jobs, they're sooner or later going to try to get practice materials and going to find Online EU Training. So this is part of the reason why the whole process is such a challenge, because so many people are interested from all EU countries. And I'm slowly getting to the point, to my point, which is just by the sheer number of candidates, it's clear that you have to practice, and you have to take the practice phase and the preparation seriously to get a good chance of succeeding. People who practice for the competitions, they usually do it via practice tests. They sit down and they look at verbal reasoning tests, numerical reasoning tests, abstract reasoning tests, and they practice. And most of the time they succeed simply by practicing. They improve their skills. Should they not understand something, or should they get stuck and can't improve anymore, there are trainings both in classrooms and online that try to explain the methodology of these tests and how to become better at them. Next slide, please. There are many ways to get a job in the EU institutions, and hopefully what we're going to achieve with this training program is to offer you a better one than hiding in a box and getting delivered into the European Commission. So let's overview what we're going to cover in the next half an hour. The first and most important thing to cover is why even prepare and practice, and I've touched on this, but there are a few other reasons as well. And then we're going to see how you can practice online using the test package that you will receive if you become one of the members of the training program. And when it comes to practicing, we will see that there are some general considerations on how to practice, and there are some specific considerations, for example, how to practice for numerical reasoning or how to practice for abstract reasoning tests. And at each point, I'm going to try to show you how you can use the resources on Online EU Training in the best way to succeed and to improve. And I think the importance of practice is neatly summarized in this little graph. We have two columns, one representing the number of candidates and the other representing the number of positions available each year. And obviously the number of candidates column is much larger. The real scale is actually even more extreme, but that wouldn't fit on the slide. But the main point is that there are a lot more candidates than positions available, and quite simply your task is to jump from the red column into the green column some way. Now, I think everybody's covered the types of positions and the exact profile, so I'm not going to go into much detail here, but just a quick overview. We have, if you could just go back to the Yeah, so we have 5 profiles. Everybody, a couple of presenters already mentioned this, the 5 profiles. One thing I wanted to mention, that even when you select the profile you're attending, you're registering for or you're applying for, even that decision must be strategic, and it's the first step in your process of getting an EU job. Why do I say that? I say that because you have vastly different chances of succeeding depending on what profile you select. Obviously, the profile, the general profile, European Public Administration, which doesn't require a specific kind of diploma, that's one of the most popular profiles. So if you go for that one, you have even larger, even heavier competition. There are more specific profiles, like the audit profile, where on the one hand, a specific kind of diploma, a specific kind of university degree is required, and on the other hand, it's maybe less popular than some other profiles. I don't mean to offend any auditors here. I'm just saying that auditing is usually, for some reason, less popular than, let's say, communication or external relations. So the main point here is if you have the qualifications and the diploma necessary to apply for a specific profile, like audit or any other profile that requires a specific kind of diploma, then you should do that. Again, we talked about other people talked about the general criteria, so I'm not going to go into that. We can skip to the next slide. Quickly wanted to overview the specific requirements, and this question always comes up. I heard that a lot of people ask about whether this kind of diploma is good, this kind of work experience will be accepted. So this slide just summarizes the options you have. Many people asked, and this was mentioned many times, that certain profiles require a relevant diploma and a relevant work experience. And it's very hard to say what that is, and this is one of the hardest parts of filling out the application form. So I wanted to give you some hints there, because you can get some information from the notice of competition. As we said, the European Public Administration profile, any diploma and any relevant work experience is good. For the law profile, you need a law degree. That's quite logical. When it becomes interesting is the communication profile, for example. For the communication profile, you can apply with a whole range of different diplomas. Communication, obviously, but also public relations, political science, media studies, and journalism. These are all diplomas that are accepted. And when it comes to work experience, the same thing holds. If you have a work experience in journalism or working as a political scientist, those will be acceptable and relevant. That will be acceptable and relevant in order for you to qualify for this profile. And last interesting thing is that external relations, diplomacy, it's a very popular profile, and interestingly, that's another profile where no specific diploma was specified by EPSO, so you don't have to have a diploma in diplomacy or international relations to apply. All right. Knowledge of first and second language, other people covered that, so we can skip that slide. I just wanted to emphasize once again that other people mentioned this as well. Your first language, the language you select as your first language, it doesn't necessarily have to be your mother tongue. If you're bilingual, then you can strategize about which language you pick. And the number of positions available, I just wanted to quickly show you this. This was also mentioned by others, but maybe it's better to overview it on a pie chart. You remember when I said that you have different chances when you pick different profiles because of the number of people who apply? Another factor is the number of positions available. Obviously, the external relations profile in the 87 competition, for example, there are only 7 positions available, whereas you have 76 positions in public administration in the 85 competition. So that's also something a factor to consider when you apply. Next slide, please. Yeah, one more. Okay, so after all this introduction, let's see how to actually get one of these jobs, how to prepare for the process, and specifically I want to talk about how you can use the practice tests on online EU training, and specifically the training package that you will receive if you apply for one of the packages offered by the Comunidad de Madrid to succeed. There are 4 tests in the pre-selection phase, as was mentioned by others: abstract, numerical, verbal reasoning, and the situational judgment test. And this practice package that they offer includes practice tests for all four of these tests. And let's see how you can use these practice tests, because it's not simply you practice, you click on the answer you think is correct, and then the system will simply tell you whether you were right or wrong. There are some tools that you can use to target your preparation and to improve specifically, and you keep up your motivation. Next slide, please. So some general considerations in which preparing online can be helpful. First of all, it's a daunting process, the whole selection, EU job selection, and there's a lot of competition. And as others mentioned, it's a long process. Just the testing period can stretch to 9 months. So it's very important to keep up your motivation, to keep being motivated, because a lot of people fall out from the process because they lose interest or lose hope after 3 or 4 months. And a very important thing is to if you want to be successful at the test, because there's going to be a lot of stress on the day of the test. You're going to be panicking even if you're not a stressful person, so it's very important to simulate the test environment as closely as possible. And then there are specific things that you can practice and prepare for in each of these 4 tests: verbal, numerical, abstract reasoning, and situational judgment. So let's see what these are. The first thing that you need to know is a lot of people doubt the usefulness of practice, because they say that, well, I'm not a natural who is very good at verbal reasoning, so why practice? I'm never going to improve dramatically, or I'm never going to be someone who scores 100% on this test. And what this graph demonstrates is that you don't have to improve dramatically. This is a so-called bell curve, or in other words, a normal distribution of scores of candidates. And what it shows is that a lot of candidates, probably 70–80% of candidates, will score in a certain range, let's say 80–85% score. Now, and what this means is that if without practice you score 80%, then 70% of the other candidates will have a better score than you have. But if you improve just a little bit, if you can just answer 1 or 2 more questions from the test, which is really something that you can achieve with practice. If you just improve a little bit, you can get a score that is a couple of percentage points higher, and that will mean that you now have a better score than 70–80% of other candidates. So when you practice, when you feel that you might be losing your motivation, what you need to remember is that you only need to improve a little bit, and that's what you can achieve with practicing persistently. The other thing I talked about is motivation. When it's such a long process, and let's be honest, it's filling out this test is not something that any of us prefer to do on a Sunday afternoon. Especially, EPSO for some reason timed the AD exam to the spring and summer, which is like the least ideal time to sit in front of a computer and practice. So you need something to gain some motivation and willpower to continue. And I think it's very important that the online EU training system offers you statistics and nice graphs and bar charts. Because I don't know about you, but if I look at a line that is going up and I know that it shows my performance and my progress, it's something from which I can gain motivation and willpower to continue. If it's just an endless process and I don't see any result, it's much harder. And some visual feedback, some visual confirmation of the fact that it makes sense what I'm doing, I think it's very useful. And this is something that's very in which online EU training is very strong, is to give you detailed statistics. Okay, can you just one slide back? There was a. Yep. So at the with the statistics, I already mentioned one factor is the motivation, but also another thing is it's very important for you to know where you are as compared to other people, because this is a competition. You don't just simply have to achieve a certain score, you have to be better than other candidates. That's just the truth. And another kind of statistics that we offer is your score compared to an average of other users, and that's also something you can look at and see the big picture of where you are in your preparation and how much more you will need to improve to stand a good chance. And now I wanted to give you some tips on how to use the practice test specifically in different test types. And the first one I want to show you is verbal reasoning. Well, the first thing you need to know is that in verbal reasoning, that's probably the one test where it's very important to practice in the language of the real exam. And I'm guessing that in 99% of the cases here, that will be Spanish. And there are very few places where you can practice verbal reasoning in Spanish. We do offer a verbal reasoning test in Spanish, and that will be part of your training package. So that's already a huge advantage, that you can practice in the real language of the test. The other thing you can do, verbal reasoning is a kind of test where I think almost everybody can score 100% given unlimited time. The real challenge here is to do the same thing with a time limit, with quite a strict time limit. You get about 100 seconds per test question to read the text, read the 4 answer options, and decide which one is correct. So being able to simulate the time limit of the exam conveniently, that's a big advantage, and that's something you will be able to do with the training package. Sticking with exam conditions, another thing that another trap that many candidates fall into is with numerical reasoning. When they are at home, they're practicing on a computer or with a book, and they're using their good old familiar calculator to get to the correct answer in a numerical reasoning test. And while that's all fine and well, in the exam you will need to use either an on-screen calculator, or you will be able to ask to be provided a calculator. And it sounds like such a tiny and insignificant detail, but learning to use an unfamiliar calculator is okay. We switched slides a little bit prematurely. Okay, so using an unfamiliar calculator can really slow you down, and you will see that losing even a couple of seconds per test question because of the unfamiliarity of the calculator can be fatal. So simulating how the whole test format looks like and how to use that little calculator will be very important. A third example I wanted to bring is abstract reasoning. Abstract reasoning, I'm sure now that you see an example, is quite familiar. It's when you have a series of shapes and then you need to figure out what happens, what is the rule that governs these, that binds together these shapes, and then you will need to pick from the lower row the shape that would come next. And with these tests, you have 1 minute per question. So again, time is of the essence, and in this case it's very important to be familiar with the format of the test, what it looks like. Even such tiny details are important, that that the series of figures will be in the top row and the answer options in the bottom row. So again, simulation of the real conditions of the real layout of the test and the exam will be important. And let me give you a couple of more specific examples for the test types. With abstract reasoning, you will see when you start practicing, if you decide to go for it, is that it is crucially important in an abstract reasoning test to look at the figures, see what these little shapes that make up the test are, and then figure out what are some of the rules, what happens to those shapes, what happens to that circle, what happens to that little triangle, why a certain shape disappears or appears in the second figure and then disappears again in the third figure. So building blocks, little shapes that make up the test, and the rules that govern the series. These will be important to master and to be able to figure them out as quickly as possible. What we can do, offer here in the practice test is to give you a detailed explanation of what happens. An explanation will detail or describe the building blocks of the tests, for example, that we have vertical lines and circles, and it will also describe the rules that you can follow to confirm that, okay, this would have been the correct answer. And I think it's very helpful, and it has a real instructional value when you can go back later and read what the rules were for this exercise. When it comes to numerical reasoning, this is a typical numerical reasoning table. You usually get a lot of data in a table format. The data can be really extravagant, like production of apples in Kenya, or megawatts of energy used in Iceland, or number of lions in a nature reserve. Really anything. It's quite fun, actually, if it wasn't an exam. And you will learn from when you're practicing is that your first task will be to figure out which data you will need to use from the table, then you will need to figure out what you need to do with that data, and then you will need to perform some actual calculations. And the way we can help with these online practice tests is, again, a detailed explanation of the steps you need to take to quickly get to the correct answer, from picking out the data that you will need to work with to figuring out what kind of calculations to perform, to actually performing those calculations. With verbal reasoning, there are completely different challenges. One is simply, it's an unfamiliar task. In real life, you never read 2 or 3 paragraphs and then having to evaluate the correctness of a couple of statements afterwards. It's an unfamiliar exercise, and one way in which you can improve is simply doing a high number of practice tests. The volume of your practice it's quite simple. The way to improve in this kind of test is to read a lot of these text passages and then to evaluate a lot of the answer options. Obviously there are ways and methods in which you can quickly read the text. That's something that you can also practice. There are tricks like reading the answer options first and then reading the text passage. And this is something that you can, again, practice if you have a large number of practice tests available. And as I already mentioned, it's also important to do it in the language of the exam. So this is how we can help here. We have a huge number of huge number of texts and tests in 10 languages, including Spanish. So here, basically, the sheer volume of your practice will be the decisive factor. And the last test type of the pre-selection test is the situational judgment test. That's the only one that will not be in your first language, but as Isabel mentioned, in the second language, in English, French, or German. And Here, again, it's very important to read the situation first, very carefully. I think it was already mentioned that this will be a work-related situation. For example, you're working on a report with a small team of people, and maybe the situation that you will need to imagine yourself in is that one of the other team members simply doesn't like you, and this situation will be intended to measure your ability to handle stress, handle such a stressful situation where you have to work with someone who doesn't want to work with you. And again, an interesting thing about this test is this is the only test type where you don't have to pick one correct answer, but two answers. One answer will be the one that you think is the best thing to do in that given situation, and the other one will be the thing that is the least good thing to do or the worst thing to do in that given situation. And in this test, just one more slide please. In this test it's very important to understand the rationale behind this test, especially because it's quite subjective. You will not always agree with the answer option that the system tells you is the most correct one. And it's not because it's a bad test. That's just because it's a subjective test, and you will have a different opinion about certain situations. And in these cases, it's very important to be familiar with the whole concept of the test and to understand the reasoning behind, let's say, answer option B being the most ideal course of action, or answer option D being the least, the worst course of action. And we can provide detailed explanations of why this one is the most effective course of action and the other one is the least effective course of action. Also, when it comes to situational judgment, detailed statistics become even more important. I think you remember in the morning they talked about the competencies that are tested by EPSO, so it's important to see a breakdown of your score by competency. This is the same thing that you will see in the EPSO competency report. One big difference is that you will only receive the competency report afterwards, so it's less useful in your preparation. Here you can see the scores. Obviously, we don't purport to know the exact score you would receive from EPSO, but it's close enough, we think, and it's useful to look at how you perform. Also, again, you can compare your score to the average of other users on online EU training. And one other thing that was mentioned in the morning was that the competency report also provides you with text-based feedback on your performance, and this is the same thing that you will receive in your training package, an online EU training. You get a report in which you can read why you scored, let's say, moderately or strongly in one competency and poorly or moderately in another competency. So we talked about the importance of practice, and I tried to highlight a few things that in which online preparation and practice can help you. These were both test specific, like specifically reading the rules that govern the abstract reasoning test in the explanation, and general, for example, the importance of simulating the test environment or using statistics as a motivator to keep motivated. And all this, all the effort that you put into is basically just keep your eye on the prize. You do all this to get to that green circle at the top, which is the reserve list from which you can be recruited to the EU institutions. And the last step in that process is when you one day, you sit at home or walking somewhere and your phone rings and you're invited to a job interview to a specific position, let's say in the European Commission. So that's always the happy ending. When it comes to practice, always a lot of people ask how much and for how long. We usually poll a lot of our users on what they do, some of the successful users on online EU training, and a lot of people said that they practiced for at least 1 to 2 months before the test. And some people practiced every day. And I'm not saying these are quite on the heavy or most committed end of the spectrum, and I'm not saying that everybody needs to do that. One takeaway from this is it is better to stretch out the practice period and practice just a little bit more frequently than to really cram and practice like a 500 questions 2 days before the exam. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because if I remember correctly, in the training package that you will receive from La Comunidad de Madrid, if you apply for it, there will be one condition attached. It's a completely free of charge training. There will be one condition attached, is that you need to make progress every week. You need to complete a certain number of test questions every week, and we believe this is a good way of kind of making yourself focus and practice regularly. And at the end, I just wanted to show you some screenshots of what you will see when you start practicing, statistics and how to configure a test. This is where you can compare your performance with the average of other users. Some further screenshots about statistics. Yeah, just one more slide. And also wanted to mention that, as I mentioned, a lot of people can succeed by simply practicing. Some other people say, okay, well, I practiced 50 or 100 numerical reasoning questions. I still don't understand how exactly that particular kind of test is calculated. For this purpose, we sometimes offer methodology webinars in which we try to give tips and tricks on how to succeed and how to kind of get through those tough phases where you feel stuck. So I just wanted to mention that. And there are some other written and downloadable resources free on the website that I think you should check it out. For example, we collected 72 questions that were asked by hundreds of candidates in previous competitions, and our experience is that usually answers 99% of the questions that might arise in your mind when you're preparing for the competition. So that's what I wanted to cover, and thank you very much for your attention, and if I'm not mistaken, we have some time for questions. 2 questions, okay.
Okay, so you? Hi. You told us that we can access the package through the applying through the Comunidad de Madrid page. Is there any alternative for those who cannot access in the 200 positions they have?
Yes, if you go on online EU training, eutraining.eu, you can get practice packages there completely independently as well. We have free packages as well as paid packages, so you can check that out. Does that answer your question?
Hi, good morning, and thank you for your presentation. I have 2 little questions. The first one, I was one of the lucky ones, of the 200 lucky ones. So I'm already, during this month, I have been preparing the tests with the Spanish, with the REPER. And I would like to ask my first question. There are 3 levels of difficulty in the EU training webpage: easy, difficult, and medium. What's the real level of difficulty for the real exam? I suppose medium or maybe medium difficult. And my second question is, as I am already registered in Arboreus, can I try and apply again for the online training with the Comunidad de Madrid? Thank you.
Let me add as the last question. I'm not I don't know the answer to that, maybe the others. And as for the other questions, The difficulty, I'm well prepared to answer this question because we get this question several times, and I think we need to find a better way of communicating this to our users, because it's always a sign if many people ask. The difficulty is really just to categorize the questions in some way. It simply means that easy questions were answered by a higher percentage of people on online EU training correctly, medium was answered by a lower percentage of people correctly, and the hard one, obviously, the lowest percentage. So I would always practice at all difficulty levels. Don't just concentrate on one, always practice with all difficulty levels, and keep in mind that in the real EPSO exam as well, these tests usually have an arc. They usually start with a couple of easier questions to get you warmed up, and then the difficulty will increase towards the end of the test.
Respecto de la otra pregunta, en principio sí, son procesos distintos. Si cumples los requisitos, es decir, si eres madrileña, en alguno de los sentidos que se ha dicho, te puedes presentar. Otra cosa distinta es si participar en dos procedimientos similares, que digamos, te apoyan de la misma manera, con el mismo tipo de test, te va a merecer la pena, dado que los dos te exigen además un seguimiento semanal. Pero vamos, en principio, sí, o sea, si cumplen los requisitos son procedimientos independientes y no son incompatibles. Una última pregunta y pasamos al último ponente.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I just have a quick question. I would like to know how different is the package that is going to be offered by the Comunidad de Madrid and the packages that you offer separately.
I'm sorry, did you ask if they are different?
Yeah, how different is the package that the Comunidad de Madrid is going to offer?
How different?
Yeah.
Do you mean like whether they have different questions in them?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yes, you know, to the extent up to the point where we still have different questions in the database, we will always give different questions to the users. If you complete your package that you got from Madrid, just make sure that if you want to purchase another package, just use the same account. So our system will know that you were already assigned, let's say, 120 questions in verbal reasoning, and you will receive different ones. If you use a different account, we can't guarantee that, because obviously we don't know that you're the same person.
Esto, de todos modos, yo creo que es más sencillo. Simplemente en el momento en que fuerais seleccionados, como nos comunicaremos con vosotros, por la misma vía, es decir, por el mismo email, si alguno se encuentra en situación, que nos lo advierta, para que nosotros podamos advertirles y que en este sentido, pues bueno, podamos asegurar que las preguntas sean distintas. Bueno, muchas gracias. Thank you very much.